Hi everyone, my name is Blake Brewer and I'm here to talk to you again about my paper topic, which was the impact of corruption on the United States government. And we mainly focus on the federal government in this presentation. So the first thing that we wanted to do with this is define corruption so that we can establish a baseline for whether or not these acts would be corrupt. And again, this is focusing on the federal government, mainly Congress and Senate, but this is applicable to both Supreme Court and the presidential seat as well. What corruption is an abuse of power, which it is from somebody who is an elected official whose job it is to carry out the wishes of their constituents. And they go against that to either benefit themselves or benefit other interests. This is unethical behavior because they are not doing the job that they are hired to do, and generally it involves some sort of money, which can be considered bribery, and obviously it negatively impacts their constituents. The first thing to talk about with regard to this is how money influences elections, and the main purpose of the politically appointed person is to keep winning elections so that they can serve their party's interests through elections. So because money has such an influential impact on the electoral cycle, it becomes imperative that candidates raise as much money as possible. I believe it's over the last 20 years, 90% of Congress seats have been filled by the person who has spent the most money on their campaign, with the exception of 2016, in which only 86% of the Congress seats were filled by the person who spent the most money on their campaign. So we have political action committees that are it's a group that contributes to a campaign, and they do have limits that they can contribute, which I believe is currently $5,000. A political action committee is a group of individuals or peoples with a specific interest that they would like to work towards, and they're pretty heavily regulated by the government. And then there's also something called a super PAC, which is a super political action committee, which they have a different set of rules. They don't work directly with candidates. They are not able to coordinate with a candidate, and they are not able to contribute directly to a candidate, but they work towards the same goal in getting somebody elected because it does further their specific interests. And as you can see here, these are some of the super PACs that have a specific leaning, whether that be conservative or liberal, in the amount of money that they've raised and spent in 2018, I believe. It's an insane amount of money that they can use to push to win specific seats, to gain certain advantages within the Senate or Congress. And it's because a super PAC has unlimited expenditure regulation, they are able to spend as much as they want to get who they want elected where they want. And this becomes very influential on the candidates because their main job is to keep getting elected so that they can vote the way that their people want them to vote. So the money has a very interesting tie into all of this and how everyone gets elected and who stays in power. Another facet of this is lobbying, which it was originally born out of the need for information before information was so widely available. Lobbyists were basically paid to be experts on a specific industry or have specific knowledge around a certain area so that they could inform people within the government on subjects that they're not experts in. You wouldn't expect a normal person who was elected to Congress to be an expert in oil and gas unless they previously worked in that. And that's what lobbyists are for. The problem is that over time, information has become more prevalent and people are able to get information in much faster, easier ways, but the lobbying industry has become a way basically for the government to, people within the government to receive money and information to buy their influence. It was in 2018, one of the lobbying firms in Washington, D.C. ended up spending over $1 million in tickets to basketball games, baseball games, things like that. And it's basically to take out and treat elected officials to persuade them to go their way when it comes to a specific industry. This is especially prevalent in things like the oil and gas industry, the uranium industry, because of all of the information that's come out about climate change over the last several years and how it's affecting our world and how those industries are directly impacting the increased rate of climate change and how it's negatively affecting our planet. But they don't want to be losing jobs, to be losing money, to be more regulated, and it becomes a very sticky situation when you see, like in this specific picture here, how the money goes into the lobbyists from special interests and then directly to politicians, being spent on them to buy their opinions. Political appointment is another issue that has come up more recently, especially with Andrew Wheeler and Scott Pruitt. They were both appointed to be EPA officials, and the problem with this is that they are appointed and then signed off on by the Senate, which in the most recent election cycle have both been conservatively held, and because of that they were able to push through somebody, Andrew Wheeler, who had previously worked for the oil and gas lobbying firm. So he was working for the Environmental Protection Agency and has been working to deregulate those industries as much as possible in the interest of others and not in the interest of the American public. This in and of itself is corruption, in my opinion, at its base level, because of the direct implications that it has on the American people, the world as a whole, and because it's in the special interests, or in the interest of special interest groups, and it's negatively impacting everybody. So my resolutions, things that will be able to fix this, is to be able to limit the ability of super PAC spending by making it a level playing field. We can hope to increase the ability of the American people's interests to be preserved and to be furthered, rather than just the interest of corporations, and basically lowering corporate tax, things like that, which can be decreased by having people who are working within the federal government who are actually held accountable to their constituents rather than to the corporate donors that they have. The next one is limiting the ability and the contact between lobbyists and politicians. If we can make this more open as to what's being received, what's being spent from the lobbying firms to politicians, we can see how they're being influenced, and we can hopefully as a people start to recognize that somebody who's being paid an exorbitant amount of money through gifts or whatever shouldn't be in power, or we can start to vote out the people that need to be, who are working not for their constituents but for corporations. And then more oversight and regulation for political appointment, I think, is necessary. As we've seen through this last several years, political appointment has been a breeze for the conservative branch of the Conservative Party, because the president who appoints them is a conservative, and then the Senate, who is the ones who confirm them, have been conservative as well. So they've been able to push through federal judges, administration, or I guess government agency administrators have all been able to be pushed through very easily. So the topics of discussion that I do have are Do you see this as corruption within the government, or is this just how the government normally works? Do you believe that politicians receiving money gifts from lobbyists should be banned or limited? Should super PACs have limits on their spending so that we can actually level the playing field and maybe a third party person could get in there, or somebody who is not spending the most might have a chance to win? Should political appointees be able to have ties to lobbying industries prior to their appointment? So like with Andrew Wheeler or Scott Pruitt having worked in oil and gas, should they be allowed to have those previous ties when they are appointed, or should that be something that should be regulated more heavily? And what do you think needs to be done or not done? Let me know. Thanks, guys.